The call came through just after I'd finished my coffee in the break room. Domestic disturbance at the Connollys, again. I'd been to their address at least a dozen times in the past year alone. Officer Delaney, the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. We've got another situation at 1422 Maple Street. Neighbors reporting shouting from the Connolly residence. I sighed, reaching for my keys. Copy that. I'm on my way. Do you want me to wait for Officer Jack's arrival before you proceed? Jack's on leave this week, I replied, already heading for the door. I'll handle it. The evening shift was typically quiet in Cedar Hills, a neighborhood where most excitement came from teenagers setting off fireworks or the occasional raccoon invasion. But the Connollys were different. I drove slowly through the residential streets, my cruiser's headlights cutting through the growing darkness. Something felt off tonight. The dispatcher had mentioned shouting, but domestic calls at the Connollys usually meant full-blown screaming matches that could wake the dead. Tonight, there was only the sound of my engine and the soft static of the radio. The modest two-story house came into view at exactly 8:15 p.m. I checked my watch out of habit, documenting the arrival time mentally for the inevitable report. The Connollys' sedan sat in the driveway, meaning they were home. A single light glowed from what I knew to be the living room window, but no shadows moved behind the curtains. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, taking in the scene. In my years responding to their calls, I'd never encountered silence from the Connolly household. Their arguments were legendary in the department. Plates are thrown, threats exchanged loud enough for the whole block to hear. This stillness was wrong. My hand rested against my holster as I approached the front door. Not drawing my weapon, but making sure it was accessible. The porch light was off, forcing me to navigate the 3 concrete steps carefully. Mr. and Mrs. Connolly, I called out, knocking firmly on the door. This is Officer Delaney with Cedar Hills Police. We received a call about a disturbance. No response. I knocked again, louder this time. Police department, please open the door. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I leaned closer and noticed the door wasn't fully closed. It was ajar by about an inch. Through the narrow opening, I could see a sliver of the unlit entryway. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. In all my visits, the Connollys had either answered the door mid-argument or purposely ignored us while continuing to shout at each other. This quiet felt dangerous. I reached for my radio, pressing the call button. Dispatch, this is Officer Delaney at the Connolly residence. Go ahead, officer, came the immediate response. I'm at the front door. No response to my knocks. The door is partially open and there's no sound from inside. I'm going to enter the premises to check on the occupant's welfare. Copy that. Do you need backup? I hesitated, looking back at the silent house. Not yet, but stay on the line. Understood, Officer Delaney. Proceeding with caution is advised. I returned the radio to my belt and called out one more time. Mr. and Mrs. Connolly, I'm entering the residence now. My fingertips pressed against the door, and it swung inward with a faint creak. The entryway was dark, illuminated only by the distant glow from the living room. I stopped at the threshold, letting my eyes adjust to the dimness. Police officer, I announced again, my voice echoing in the unnatural stillness. Is anyone home? The familiar layout of the Connolly house stretched before me. A narrow hallway leading to the kitchen on the right, stairs to the second floor on the left, and the living room straight ahead. The source of light seemed to be a floor lamp in the corner of the living room, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Something was definitely wrong. The Connollys' house had never been this quiet, not in all my visits. They lived loud. They fought loud. They made up loud. Their entire existence seemed to be conducted at maximum volume. I unsnapped my holster but didn't draw my weapon yet. With slow, measured steps, I moved into the hallway, my senses hyper-alert. The house smelled different. Not the usual mixture of Mrs. Connolly's floral air freshener attempting to mask the scent of Mr. Connolly's cigarettes. Tonight, there was something else in the air. Something metallic and wrong. Mr. Connolly? Mrs. Connolly? This is Officer Delaney. I need to know if you're okay. As I approached the living room entrance, my foot connected with something small and hard that skittered across the hardwood floor. I aimed my flashlight down to see a cell phone with a cracked screen, now resting against the baseboard. I picked up the cracked phone from the floor, turning it over in my gloved hand. Mrs. Connolly's, judging by the floral case. The screen still illuminated when I pressed the power button, showing several missed calls from work. "Mr. Connolly? Mrs. Connolly?" I called again, stepping fully into the living room. Something was immediately wrong. Rex, their German shepherd, should have been barking his head off by now. That dog never let a stranger enter without announcing it to the entire neighborhood. The silence, where his barking should be felt, more ominous than any sound could have. The living room was a disaster zone. A bottle of red wine had spilled across the beige carpet, looking like a dark bloodstain in the dim light. The couch was shoved at an angle, and one of the armchairs was completely overturned. The glass coffee table lay in jagged shards across the floor, reflecting the television's glow in hundreds of glittering pieces. "Police! Is anyone home?" My voice echoed through the house, met only by the cheerful voice of a game show host on the television. The volume was low, but in the silence of the house, I could make out contestants cheering as they spun a colorful wheel. I moved further into the room, carefully avoiding the glass. My hand now rested on my service weapon, though I hadn't drawn it yet. The hairs on my arms stood on end as I surveyed the dining area connected to the living room. 2 plates sat on the table, food half-eaten. Spaghetti, garlic bread, 2 wine glasses, one toppled over, responsible for the stain on the carpet. The chairs were pushed back haphazardly, one lying on its side as if someone had stood up in a hurry. Cedar Hills Police Department. Mr. and Mrs. Connolly. I need you to respond if you're here. Only the game show audience applauded in response. I unholstered my weapon now, holding it in a low, ready position. Something about the scene felt dangerous in a way the Connollys' usual disputes never had. Their fights were loud, sometimes destructive. But this felt like violence of a different nature. I keyed my radio. "Dispatch, Officer Delaney again. No contact with residents yet, but signs of a struggle in the living room. Requesting backup." "Copy that. Officer Peterson is en route, ETA 7 minutes. Evan." "Roger that." I moved toward the kitchen, sweeping my flashlight beam across the hallway. The kitchen light was on, casting harsh fluorescent illumination over another scene of chaos. The knife block had been knocked over, several large kitchen knives scattered across the counter and floor. Every drawer had been yanked open, contents spilled onto the linoleum. Cabinet doors hung open, and broken plates and glasses crunched under my boots. What the hell happened here? I muttered to myself, scanning the room. That's when I noticed it. A trail of dark droplets leading from the kitchen toward the hallway. They glistened under my flashlight beam, still wet, fresh. I followed the trail, my weapon raised now, all senses on high alert. The droplets led toward the bathroom at the end of the hall, becoming more frequent, larger. "Police officer. Anyone in there?" The bathroom door was ajar, darkness spilling out. As I approached, my flashlight beam caught something on the floor just outside the door, a mass of fur. "Rex?" I called softly, already knowing there would be no response. The German shepherd lay on his side, his body unnaturally still. As I drew closer, I could see the extent of the damage. The dog's side had been torn open, exposing ribs and tissue beneath matted fur. Blood had pooled beneath him, soaking into the hallway carpet. I crouched down, my stomach turning as I got a better look at the wounds. These weren't knife wounds. They were ragged, torn. My flashlight revealed distinct marks along the edges of the wound. Teeth marks. Human teeth marks. I stood quickly, aiming my weapon at the bathroom door. "Cedar Hills Police, come out with your hands up." My voice was steady despite the pounding of my heart. Silence. I keyed my radio again, keeping my eyes fixed on the bathroom door. "Dispatch Officer Delaney. I need immediate backup at the Connolly residence. Possible homicide scene. Tell Peterson to step on it." "Copy that, officer. Dispatching additional units. What's your situation?" "The family dog is deceased with what appear to be human bite marks. No contact with residents yet. I'm continuing to clear the house, but proceeding with extreme caution." "Understood. Backup is coming. Captain Morgan has been notified." I returned my attention to the bathroom door, my mind racing. In all my years on the force, all my visits to this house, I'd never imagined finding something like this. The Connollys fought, sometimes violently, but this was something else entirely. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness as I ascended the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. I kept my service weapon raised, moving methodically toward the upper floor. The wall beside the staircase displayed framed photos of the Connollys through happier years, vacations, and holidays. The upstairs hallway stretched before me, 3 closed doors waiting. I approached the first, slightly ajar, and nudged it open with my foot. A guest bathroom, untouched. The second door revealed a home office, papers scattered across the floor but otherwise undisturbed. The master bedroom door was the last one, standing partially open. Blood smeared the door frame in what looked like finger marks, as if someone had grasped for stability, or been dragged against their will. "Mr. Connolly, Mrs. Connolly," I called, knowing now I was unlikely to receive an answer. I pushed the door open with my elbow, weapon ready, and swept my flashlight across the scene. The bedroom had been transformed into a battleground. The king-sized mattress lay half off its frame, sheets torn and stained with dark patches. Lamps that had once stood on matching nightstands now lay shattered on the floor, their ceramic bases splintered into jagged pieces. The dresser mirror hung cracked on the wall, fracturing my reflection into distorted segments. What caught my attention most were the walls. Blood had been smeared in erratic patterns, not splatter from an impact, but deliberate, sweeping arcs that reminded me of finger painting. Some marks appeared to form crude symbols I didn't recognize. "Jesus," I whispered, the word escaping involuntarily. I moved carefully through the destruction, documenting everything mentally for my report. A jewelry box lay upended on the floor, necklaces and earrings scattered across the carpet. The closet door hung from a single hinge, clothes spilling out as if someone had frantically searched through them. On the far side of the room stood Mrs. Connolly's vanity, a white antique piece that seemed oddly intact amidst the chaos. I approached it, noticing the collection of perfume bottles and makeup arranged with peculiar neatness compared to the surrounding destruction. Among the cosmetics sat a small glass jar with a handwritten label. I picked it up carefully, examining it through my latex gloves. The label read, "Amazon Special" in flowing script, with smaller text beneath, "Apply nightly for transformation." The jar contained a thick, greenish-brown substance with an oily sheen. I unscrewed the lid and immediately recoiled from the pungent odor. Something between rotting vegetation and burnt hair. Beside the jar lay a crumpled receipt. I smoothed it out, reading the faded text. "Traditional medicine, $75. Paid in full. Thank you for your business. Raymond Velasquez." The name struck a chord. Jack had mentioned Velasquez last month during a shift change. Something about buying a miracle cure for his back pain. He'd been secretive about it, changing the subject when I asked questions. I pocketed the receipt and screwed the lid back on the jar, placing it in an evidence bag from my pocket. Whatever the substance was, it needed analysis. My flashlight beam swept across the nightstand that remained upright. Amid the chaos stood a collection of family photos in silver frames, untouched by the surrounding violence. The Connollys smiled back at me. Her in a floral dress, him with an arm around her shoulders, both looking normal, happy even. Nothing like the scene of brutality surrounding me. The contrast was jarring. In one photo they posed with Rex, the German shepherd now lying dead downstairs. Mrs. Connolly held the dog's face lovingly between her hands, her smile genuine and warm. I stared at the image, trying to reconcile it with the blood-stained walls and shattered furniture. What had happened to transform ordinary domestic tension into this nightmare? A sudden thud from downstairs broke my concentration. I froze, listening intently. The house had been silent since my arrival. Until now, another sound followed, something heavy being dragged across the floor. I moved quickly but carefully back toward the stairs, weapon raised. At the top of the staircase, I paused, peering down into the dimly lit hallway. Nothing visible moved in the shadows below. Descending one step at a time, I kept my back to the wall, minimizing my profile. When I reached the bottom, I noticed something I'd missed before. A fresh trail of blood droplets leading across the entryway floor. These hadn't been here when I arrived. Someone, or something, was moving through the house. I followed the trail, which led toward a narrow door beneath the staircase. A door I hadn't noticed during my initial sweep. It was painted the same color as the surrounding wall, blending almost seamlessly with its surroundings. The blood trail disappeared beneath it. A basement entrance. The door featured a heavy deadbolt lock on the outside. Someone had locked something in. I approached cautiously, noting scratch marks on the lower part of the door as if something had tried to claw its way out from within. The wood around the lock showed signs of fresh damage. Pressing my ear against the door, I held my breath to listen. Wet, slurping sounds emanated from the other side, like something feeding. Between these noises came low, guttural moans that sounded almost, but not quite, human. I stood frozen at the basement door, the wet, slurping sounds growing louder. My training urged me to wait for backup, but something told me time was critical. The scratches on the door, the fresh blood trail. Whatever was happening behind this door couldn't wait 7 more minutes. I tested the deadbolt. It turned with surprising ease, as if recently used. Drawing a deep breath, I pushed the door open. A set of wooden stairs descended into blackness. My light caught dust particles dancing in the air, stirred by the opening door. The smell hit me immediately. The metallic tang of blood now mixed with the unmistakable stench of decay. It was the smell of death, but not fresh death. This was older, rotting, putrid. Mr. Connolly, Mrs. Connolly, this is Officer Delaney with Cedar Hills Police. The slurping sound stopped. Something moved in the darkness below. I took the first step, wincing as the wood creaked beneath my weight. The sound echoed through the basement, announcing my presence to whatever waited below. My service weapon remained steady in my right hand, flashlight in my left, both aimed down the staircase. Another step. Another creak. The basement air grew thicker and heavier with each foot of descent. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the coolness. Halfway down, I noticed a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting weak yellow light over the center of the unfinished basement. The illumination barely reached the concrete walls, leaving the corners shrouded in shadow. Directly beneath the light sat a hunched figure, Mr. Connolly. He knelt in the center of the room, his back to me, shoulders moving rhythmically. He wore what had once been a white dress shirt, now soaked through with dark stains. His hands worked at something on the floor before him. "Mr. Connolly," I called out, my voice steady, despite the pounding in my chest. "This is Officer Delaney. I need you to stand up slowly with your hands where I can see them." He didn't respond, didn't even flinch at the sound of my voice. The rhythmic movement continued uninterrupted. I descended the remaining stairs, keeping my weapon trained on his back. The concrete floor of the basement was cold and damp. My flashlight beam swept the space, revealing shelves of old paint cans, gardening tools, and holiday decorations. Normal basement items that felt bizarrely mundane, given the circumstances. "Mr. Connolly, I won't ask again. Stand up and put your hands where I can see them." Still no response. Just the wet sounds of something. I moved a circle around him, keeping my distance, while trying to get a better view of what he was doing. My flashlight beam finally revealed what lay before him on the floor: a severed human hand. The beam shook slightly as the reality registered. Mr. Connolly was hunched over a woman's hand, torn at the wrist, flesh hanging in strips. His mouth worked at the exposed flesh, teeth tearing away chunks while blood and drool dripped from his chin onto the concrete. My stomach lurched. In 15 years on the force, I'd seen homicides, suicides, car accidents that turned humans into unrecognizable masses. But this, a man feeding on human flesh with such focused intensity, this was something else entirely. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, the words escaping involuntarily. My flashlight beam widened its arc, revealing the true horror of the scene. Scattered around Connolly lay more body parts. A leg severed at the knee, still wearing a blood-soaked floral sock. A cage of ribs with meat hanging in ribbons. Other chunks of flesh I couldn't immediately identify. And, in the corner, partially hidden by shadow, lay what remained of Mrs. Connolly's torso, her face frozen in an expression of terror. The floral dress from the family photos was now shredded and soaked with blood. "Cedar Hills, police, freeze." My voice echoed off the concrete walls, bouncing back at me with unexpected force. Mr. Connolly continued chewing, seemingly oblivious to my presence or commands. His fingers dug into the flesh of the severed hand, pulling tendons apart with methodical precision. I keyed my radio, eyes never leaving the feeding man. "Dispatch, Officer Delaney. I need immediate medical response at the Connolly residence. Suspect located in basement with human remains. Situation is critical." "Copy that, officer. Medical units dispatched." I returned my full attention to Connolly. "Mr. Connolly, I am ordering you to put down what you're holding and place your hands behind your head. Do it now." When he still didn't respond, I took a step closer, weapon trained on his head. "This is your final warning." Something about my proximity must have finally registered. Connolly's movement slowed, then stopped. He remained motionless for several seconds, still hunched over his grisly meal. Then, with unnatural stillness, his head began to turn. Not his body, just his head, rotating toward me, while his shoulders remained facing away. The movement was wrong, too fluid, exceeding the natural range of human neck mobility. His face came into view, illuminated by my flashlight. Blood and gore covered his chin and cheeks. Chunks of flesh stuck between his teeth. But it was his eyes that froze my blood. Pupils dilated to the point that no iris was visible, just black holes in a blood-spattered face. Those eyes held nothing human. "Mr. Connolly," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, "I need you to comply with my instructions immediately." His head tilted slightly like a predator assessing prey. A string of bloody drool hung from his lower lip, stretching toward the concrete floor. I took another step forward, determined to take control of the situation. "I'm placing you under arrest. Put your hands where I can see them." In a movement too fast to track, Connolly's entire body spun toward me. The severed hand dropped from his grasp, hitting the floor with a wet slap. He rose to a crouched position, fingers splayed like claws, head lowered like an animal about to charge. "Don't move!" I shouted, finger tensing on the trigger. He lunged. The distance between us disappeared in an instant. Before I could fire, his body slammed into mine with inhuman force. We crashed backward, my shoulder blading the concrete wall. Pain exploded across my back, but adrenaline kept me focused. Connolly's hand clamped around my wrist, forcing my weapon up toward the ceiling. His strength was impossible, far beyond what his frame should have allowed. His face pressed close to mine, those black eyes inches away, breath reeking of copper and rot. His mouth opened wide, revealing teeth-stained crimson. With shocking speed, he bit down on my forearm, teeth tearing through the uniform fabric and into flesh. Pain seared through my arm like fire. I screamed, instinctively pulling the trigger of my upward-pointed weapon. The gunshot exploded in the confined space, deafening me momentarily. Using my free hand, I smashed my flashlight against Connolly's temple. The impact forced him to release my arm, giving me just enough space to bring my weapon down. I fired twice into his chest at point-blank range. The bullets hit center mass, the impacts jerking his body backward. Blood blossomed across his already stained shirt. Any normal person would have dropped instantly. Connolly stumbled back 2 steps, looked down at the wounds with something like confusion, then raised his head again. His expression hadn't changed. No pain, no shock, just that same predatory focus. He moved forward again, slower, but still coming. I aimed higher and fired again. The bullet struck him between the eyes, snapping his head back. For a moment he remained standing, swaying slightly. Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed to the concrete floor, body twitching once before going still. Silence fell over the basement, broken only by my ragged breathing and the ringing in my ears from the gunshots. My arm throbbed where Connolly's teeth had torn through skin and muscle. I stared at his motionless body, weapon still trained on him, unwilling to believe he was truly down. No one should have remained standing after 2 center mass shots. Nothing human, anyway. Blood pooled beneath his head, spreading slowly across the concrete. His eyes remained open, black and empty, staring at nothing. The sound of sirens reached me from outside, Peterson arriving with backup. But I couldn't move, couldn't take my eyes off Connolly's body, couldn't lower my weapon. Something had transformed this ordinary man with an ordinary temper into something monstrous, something that ate human flesh and shrugged off bullets. My gaze drifted to the scattered remains of Mrs. Connolly, to the jar of Amazon Special upstairs, to the blood-smeared walls with their crude symbols. Whatever had happened in this house went beyond anything in the police manual, beyond anything in my 15 years of experience. And as the pain in my arm pulsed with each heartbeat, I wondered if it was already spreading inside me. Hunger, unbound. The sound of Mr. Connolly's body hitting the concrete echoed through the basement. I staggered back, my arm throbbing where his teeth had broken the skin. Blood seeped through my uniform sleeve, warm and sticky against my skin. A scraping noise from the far corner froze me in place. The beam of my dropped flashlight, now rolling on the floor, swept across the basement in an erratic arc, briefly illuminating something moving in the shadows. I retrieved my weapon from where it had fallen and aimed toward the sound. "Police, don't move." My voice sounded hollow in the dank space. A figure emerged from the darkness. Mrs. Connolly stepped into the weak light, her flowery dress, the one she wore in those family photos upstairs, now soaked dark with blood. Chunks of what looked like raw flesh clung to her hair, and crimson streaks painted her once gentle face. Her bare feet left wet, red footprints on the concrete. "Mrs. Connolly," I said, steadying my aim despite the pain shooting through my arm. "Stay where you are." She tilted her head at an unnatural angle, studying me. Her movements weren't right, jerky and disconnected, like a marionette with tangled strings. She took another step forward, her dress making a wet sound as it clung to her legs. "Stop! Do not come any closer!" I shouted, backing toward the stairs. Her eyes reflected the weak light, the same glazed, dilated look I'd seen in her husband's. No recognition, no humanity, just hunger. A gurgling sound escaped her throat, not words, not even an attempt at communication, just the primal noise of a predator. "This is your final warning," I called out, my back now against the base of the stairs. "Stop moving or I will shoot." She lurched forward suddenly, covering half the distance between us in one uneven stride. I fired a warning shot into the concrete beside her. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, but she didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just kept coming, that terrible gurgling growing louder. "Mrs. Connolly, stop!" Another step, then another, 10 feet away now. I aimed at her shoulder and fired. The bullet struck true. I saw her body jerk with the impact and saw blood bloom across the floral pattern of her dress. She staggered slightly, looked down at the wound with mild curiosity, then continued her approach. 8 feet, 6 feet. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice cracking. She lunged with shocking speed, covering the remaining distance in a blur of motion. Her body slammed into mine with enough force to knock the breath from my lungs. My back hit the concrete hard. My weapon still clutched in my hand, but pinned awkwardly beneath her weight. Her face hovered inches above mine, that same terrible grin her husband had worn. Her breath reeked of copper and rot. With supernatural strength, she pinned my injured arm to the floor. I struggled, but her grip was like iron. She lowered her head to my shoulder and sank her teeth through my uniform. Pain exploded through me, white-hot and blinding. I screamed, twisting beneath her, managing to free my gun hand just enough. I pressed the barrel against her chest and fired. Once, twice, 3 times. The shots were muffled against her body, but I felt her jerk with each impact. She released my shoulder, blood, mine and hers, dripping from her lips. Her eyes, for just a moment, cleared. Something human flickered there as she slumped against me. "The medicine," she whispered, her voice raspy and wet. "Makes us hungry." Then the light faded from her eyes, and she collapsed fully onto me, dead weight pinning me to the floor. I lay there for several seconds, gasping for breath, before summoning the strength to push her body off. My shoulder burned where she'd bitten through fabric and flesh. Blood soaked my uniform, and the room tilted strangely when I tried to stand. Shock. I recognized the symptoms, even as they overtook me. One step at a time, I dragged myself up the basement stairs, leaving a trail of blood droplets behind me. My weapon felt impossibly heavy in my hand, but I couldn't make myself holster it. Not yet. The main floor of the house seemed impossibly bright after the basement darkness. I staggered through the kitchen, past Rex's body in the hallway, toward the front door that I'd left open upon arrival. Outside, flashing lights painted the neighborhood in pulses of red and blue. Patrol cars lined the street. Backup had finally arrived. The cool night air hit my face as I stumbled onto the porch. Officer Peterson was already running up the walkway, weapon drawn, when I emerged. "Delaney! Jesus Christ!" he shouted, holstering his gun as he saw my condition. I made it 3 more steps before my legs gave out. The front lawn rushed up to meet me, grass cool against my face. "Officer down! I need an ambulance now." Peterson's voice seemed to come from very far away. His hands pressed against my wounded shoulder, sending fresh waves of pain through my body. "The Connollys," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "Both deceased. Basement." "Don't talk," Peterson ordered. "Ambulance is coming." More voices joined his. Radio chatter, footsteps on the lawn, someone shouting orders. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, darkness creeping in from all sides. The last thing I heard was Peterson calling my name, again and again, as the night closed around me. I drifted in and out of darkness, haunted by images of blood-smeared walls and a woman's vacant eyes. The sensation of teeth sinking into my flesh played on repeat. Fragments of consciousness came and went, voices discussing my condition, hands checking my vitals, the sharp sting of a needle in my arm. Time lost all meaning when I finally opened my eyes fully. Harsh fluorescent light assaulted my vision. I blinked several times, trying to bring the hospital room into focus. An IV line ran from my arm to a machine beside the bed. My shoulder and forearm were heavily bandaged, a dull, throbbing pain pulsing beneath the dressings. A doctor stood at the foot of my bed, writing notes on a clipboard. When she noticed my movement, she approached. "Officer Delaney, welcome back. I'm Dr. Wells," she said, her voice measured and professional. "Do you know where you are?" My throat felt like sandpaper. "Hospital," I managed to croak. She nodded, pouring water from a plastic pitcher into a cup and helping me drink. "Cedar Hills Memorial. You've been here for 3 days, mostly sedated while we treated your injuries. 3 days." My mind struggled to process the gap in time. The last thing I remembered was collapsing on the Connollys' front lawn, Peterson's voice calling my name as darkness claimed me. "Your wounds required extensive cleaning and stitching," Dr. Wells continued, checking the monitors beside my bed. "Human bites are notoriously prone to infection. We've had you on a strong course of antibiotics since you arrived." The memory of Mrs. Connolly's teeth tearing through my uniform sent a shudder through me. "The Connollys," I said, my voice stronger now. "They were both deceased, yes. I understand you were the responding officer." She adjusted something on my IV drip. "Captain Morgan has been waiting to speak with you. He's asked to be notified when you regained consciousness." I nodded, wincing at the pain that radiated from my shoulder with the movement. "I'll send a nurse in with something for the pain," Dr. Wells said, noting my discomfort. "The captain will likely be here within the hour. Try to rest until then." After she left, I stared at the ceiling, trying to organize my fragmented thoughts. Images from the Connolly basement flashed through my mind. The severed limbs, the blood-soaked concrete, the inhuman hunger in their eyes. I'd seen plenty of crime scenes in my career, but nothing like that night. True to Dr. Wells's word, Captain Morgan arrived less than an hour later. The door swung open, revealing his imposing figure. Despite his crisp uniform, the dark circles under his eyes told me the past few days had been difficult for the department. "Tom," he said, pulling a chair to my bedside. "Good to see you conscious. You had us worried." "Sir," I acknowledged, attempting to sit up straighter. "No need for formalities. You've earned a pass after what you went through." He set a folder on the edge of my bed. "How much do you remember?" "Everything up until I collapsed outside the house." "Did Peterson secured the scene. We had a full forensics team there within the hour." The captain rubbed his forehead. 20 years on the force, and I've never seen anything like what you walked into." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. "The remains in the basement. We've identified them," he said, opening the folder. "Lisa Parker, 32, local yoga instructor. reported missing 2 weeks ago when she didn't show up for her evening classes. A photo slid across the blanket toward me, a smiling blonde woman in colorful yoga clothes. The image blurred slightly as I stared at it, imagining her fate. "Any connection to the Connollys?" I asked. Captain Morgan shook his head. "None that we can find. She lived on the other side of town, different social circles, no overlapping acquaintances. That's what makes this case so bizarre." I recalled Mrs. Connolly's final words. Before she died, Mrs. Connolly said something about medicine, that it made them hungry. "We found the jar you mentioned in your initial radio call," the captain said. "Forensics analyzed the substance. It contained traces of an unknown compound along with several plant extracts, some of which have hallucinogenic properties." "Where did they get it?" "The receipt you recovered led us to a Raymond Velasquez. He's disappeared. Apartment cleared out. Phone disconnected. We're still looking for him." He leaned forward. "Did you see anything else unusual at the scene? Anything that might explain what happened to the Connollys?" I described the blood-stained walls, the strange symbols, the unnatural strength both Connollys had displayed. As I spoke, the captain's expression grew increasingly troubled. "Whatever they took, it altered them somehow," I concluded. "Made them violent, animalistic." Captain Morgan nodded slowly. "Get some rest, Tom. We'll need your official report once you're fully recovered." 2 weeks of mandatory medical leave felt like an eternity. The hospital stay, the psych evaluations, and the endless nightmares that accompanied my recovery merged into a hazy blur. Captain Morgan's words from my hospital room played in my mind as I approached the Cedar Hills Police Department building for the first time since the Connolly incident. "Get some rest," he had said, as if rest were possible with the memory of teeth tearing through flesh permanently seared into my mind. My shoulder and forearm still ached beneath the healing wounds. I took a deep breath and pushed through the glass doors. The usual morning bustle of the station halted as I entered. Heads turned, conversations died mid-sentence. Officer Peterson spotted me first. "Delaney's back," he announced, breaking the awkward silence. The room erupted in applause. My colleagues surrounded me, patting my back and offering words of welcome tinged with reverence. Peterson gripped my hand firmly, careful to avoid my injured arm. "Good to have you back, hero," he said. The word made me flinch. I was no hero. I had barely survived. Captain Morgan emerged from his office, nodding approvingly. "Welcome back, Tom. Take it easy today. Desk duty until medical clears you for full service." I nodded, grateful for the reprieve from patrol, yet strangely disconnected from the camaraderie around me. The world seemed muted somehow, as if I were watching everything through a pane of glass. Jack wasn't among the welcoming committee. I found him at his desk, head bowed over paperwork. He had returned from his unexplained leave of absence just days before the Connolly incident, according to Peterson. "Hey, partner," I said, settling into my chair across from him. He jumped at my voice, pen skittering across the form he'd been filling out. "Jesus, Tom. Didn't see you there." Jack looked terrible. His complexion had a grayish tinge beneath a sheen of sweat that beaded along his hairline. Dark circles rimmed his bloodshot eyes, which darted around, never meeting mine directly. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine. Just fine." He tugged at his collar. "Glad you're back. Real mess. That Connolly thing." Something about Jack's scent caught my attention. Beneath his cologne lurked a familiar odor, something earthy and pungent that triggered an instant flashback to the Connolly basement. My stomach clenched. Throughout the morning, Jack disappeared for long periods. Bathroom breaks that stretched to 15 minutes, sudden errands to the evidence room, a coffee run that took half an hour. Each time he returned, sweat dampened his shirt collar, and that smell grew stronger. Around noon, I headed to the break room for lunch. Jack's voice drifted from around the corner, tight with barely controlled anger. "That wasn't the deal," he hissed into his phone. "The merchandise was supposed to be safe." I froze, pressing myself against the wall. "I don't care about your profit margins," Jack continued. "These side effects weren't in the brochure. My customers are asking questions I can't answer." A pause as the person on the other end spoke. "Listen, if this gets traced back to me..." Another pause. "No, I'm not threatening you. But Velasquez disappeared and people are looking." I held my breath at the mention of Velasquez, the name on the receipt from the Connolly's house. "Fine. Tomorrow night. Same place." Jack ended the call. I waited a beat before entering the break room, pretending I'd heard nothing. Jack spun around, phone disappearing into his pocket. "Tom," he said, voice artificially light. "Grabbing lunch?" "Just a sandwich." I moved to the refrigerator, watching him from the corner of my eye. "Everything okay?" Sounded like an intense call. "Just my supplement supplier." He wiped sweat from his brow. "Sent me the wrong protein powder. Told him I wanted a refund." The lie hung between us like smoke. "Right," I said, unwrapping my sandwich. "Protein powder." Jack checked his watch. "Got an appointment. Cover for me with the captain?" Before I could answer, he was gone. I spent the afternoon reviewing files, my mind churning with suspicions. The connection between Jack and Velasquez seemed undeniable, but I needed more evidence. At 3 o'clock, the dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. "Unit 14. Respond to a disturbance at Riverside Apartments. Building C. Neighbor dispute turned violent." Jack returned just as I reached for the radio. We locked eyes. "I'll drive," he said. Riverside Apartments stood on the east side of Cedar Hills, a collection of 3-story buildings arranged around a central courtyard. As we pulled into the parking lot, 2 residents waved us toward Building C. "Apartment 306, a woman explained. "Jerry bit Frank during an argument about parking spaces. Frank's bleeding pretty bad." Jack and I exchanged glances. Human bites were uncommon in standard disputes. "Two-man response," I said. "Let's both go up." Jack shook his head. "We'll cover more ground if we split up. I'll take the stairwell and work up. You check with the victim." Before I could protest, he jogged toward the stairwell entrance. I headed for the elevator, unease crawling up my spine. On the 3rd floor, paramedics had already arrived. They knelt beside a middle-aged man seated on the hallway floor outside apartment 306. Blood seeped through a temporary bandage on his forearm. "Says the neighbor just went crazy," one paramedic explained. "Latched onto his arm and wouldn't let go. Took 2 other residents to pull him off." The coppery scent of blood hit me like a physical force. My mouth filled with saliva, a sudden hunger twisting through my gut. The sensation was foreign and revolting, yet undeniable. I found myself stepping closer, eyes fixed on the crimson stain spreading through the gauze. The paramedic's voice faded to background noise as a single thought consumed me. I wanted to taste it. "Officer, you okay?" The paramedic's question snapped me back to reality. I realized I'd moved to within inches of the bleeding man, my hand halfway extended toward his wound. "Fine," I said, stepping back abruptly, just checking the severity. Horror washed through me. What the hell was happening? I pressed my back against the opposite wall, fighting the inexplicable urge to approach the blood again. Jack appeared from the stairwell, breathing heavily. "No sign of the suspect," he reported. "Must have fled through the back exit." The hunger subsided as I focused on Jack's face. Sweat poured down his temples despite the minimal exertion of climbing stairs. "We need to search the surrounding area," I said. my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll drive." Jack seemed to notice my intensity. "You sure? Medical cleared you for—" "I'll drive," I repeated. We spent the next 2 hours searching for the suspect without success. As our shift neared its end, I made my decision. "I'll drop you home," I told Jack as we headed back to the station. "We need to talk." His eyes narrowed. "About what?" "Things I overheard. Things I noticed." I kept my voice neutral. "I think you know what I mean." Jack's hand twitched toward his pocket before he caught himself. "Fine. Talk." After signing out, I took the department SUV and headed east, away from Jack's apartment. This isn't the way to my place," he objected. "We're taking the scenic route." I turned onto Lakeview Drive, the winding road that followed the shoreline of Lake Cedar before looping back toward town. As evening approached, the area would be deserted. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the overlook parking area. A small gravel lot with a view of the lake and surrounding forests. No other cars were present. I cut the engine and turned to face my partner. "What's your connection to Raymond Velasquez?" I asked without preamble. Jack's face drained of color, then flushed red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I found his name at the Connolly house," I continued, "and today I heard you mention him on the phone. You're supplying something that has side effects." "You were eavesdropping on my private conversation?" Jack's voice rose with defensive anger. "The Connollys had a substance labeled Amazon Special. It transformed them into something inhuman." I leaned closer. "And now you smell like they did." Jack's hand moved toward his holster. I caught his wrist. "Don't," I warned. "Whatever you're involved in, I deserve answers, especially since I think you've somehow exposed me to it." "Let go of me," he said. I tightened my hold. "Not until you explain what's going on." Jack's breathing quickened. Sweat beaded along his hairline despite the cool air blowing from the vents. The smell emanating from him grew stronger, earthy, pungent, with undertones of something rotten. "You don't know what you're asking about," he said. "I know enough. The Connollys had something called Amazon Special. The same substance you're discussing with your supplement supplier. The same one connected to Raymond Velasquez." Jack stared at the dashboard. His free hand trembled against his thigh. "I have nothing to do with what happened to those people," he insisted. "Then explain why you smell like their basement. Explain why you mentioned Velasquez on the phone." The muscles in Jack's jaw tightened. He pulled against my grip, but I held firm. "You've got no proof of anything," he said. "I don't need proof for a conversation between partners. I need the truth." Something shifted in Jack's demeanor. The defensive tension in his shoulders loosened. His mouth twitched at the corners, then spread into a smile. A laugh burst from his throat, harsh and unnatural. It grew until he shook with it, tears streaming down his flushed face. "The truth?" He wheezed between bursts of laughter. "You want the truth?" I released his wrist and shifted my hand closer to my weapon. "Start talking." Jack's laughter subsided to sporadic chuckles. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Fine. I sold them the ointment. The Connollys. They were customers. Where did you get it?" "South America." Jack leaned his head back against the seat. "That leave of absence I took last month? I wasn't visiting my sick mother. I went to Peru, deep into the Amazon." The pieces began falling into place. Jack's unexplained absence, his nervous energy since returning, the secretive phone calls. "A shaman in a village near Iquitos," Jack continued. "The locals said he had medicine that could change your life, open your mind, heighten your senses. And you decided to become what? A drug dealer?" His eyes flashed with anger. "Not drugs, medicine, ancient knowledge. Do you know how much people pay for that kind of authentic experience? $500 per jar. The Connollys weren't having an experience. They were eating people. Jack waved his hand dismissively. Side effects. The shaman warned that some users might experience increased appetite, more sensory awareness. Increased appetite? They ripped apart a woman and ate her. My voice rose with each word. I shot Mr. Connolly 3 times before he went down. What was in that substance? I don't know the exact ingredients. Plants, fungi, some kind of animal gland. Jack's eyes took on a distant quality. The shaman said it connects users to primal forces, removes the barriers of civilization. And Lisa Parker? How does she fit into this? Jack's expression shifted. A smile spread across his face that made my skin crawl. I needed to understand what was happening to the Connollys. Their behavior changed after just 1 week of using the ointment. They started calling me, complaining about hunger. Nothing could satisfy. He licked his lips. I was curious. The implication turned my stomach. You brought her to them. I told her the Connollys wanted private yoga instruction. She was so eager for new clients. Jack's smile widened. I watched from outside, saw what they did to her, how they changed. You son of a bitch. My hand moved to my holster. Don't act so superior, Tom. I saw your face at Riverside Apartments today. The way you looked at that bleeding man. What are you talking about? You're changing too. Jack leaned forward. Those bites you received from the Connollys? The infection isn't bacterial. It's something else. I remembered the strange hunger I'd felt at the apartment complex. The overwhelming desire to taste blood. My heart pounded against my ribs. You've taken it too, haven't you? I asked. The ointment. Jack rolled up his sleeve, revealing a patch of discolored skin on his forearm. Red and inflamed, with strange patterns spreading outward like roots. I had to know what it felt like, he said, after seeing what it did to the Connollys. As he spoke, his pupils expanded, black consuming the irises until his eyes resembled empty pits. The same vacant stare Mr. Connolly had given me from the basement floor. You're infected, I whispered. Enhanced, Jack corrected. I can smell your blood right now, Tom. I can hear it rushing through your veins. I reached for my weapon, but Jack moved with unnatural speed. He lunged across the center console, fingers curled into claws, mouth open wide. His teeth snapped inches from my throat as I threw up my arm to block him. We grappled in the confined space. The car rocked with our movements. Jack's strength was shocking, the same impossible power I'd encountered in the Connollys. He clawed at my face, trying to position his mouth near my neck. I just want a taste, he growled, voice distorted and thick. Just a small bite. I slammed my elbow into his sternum. The blow would have incapacitated a normal person, but Jack barely flinched. His fingernails, now somehow longer and sharper, raked across my cheek, drawing blood. The scent of my own blood seemed to drive him into a frenzy. Jack howled, redoubling his efforts. His weight pinned my gun arm against the door. You're one of us now, he snarled between attempts to bite me. Fighting only makes it hurt more. I smashed my forehead into his nose. Cartilage crunched. Blood gushed down his face, but the pain didn't slow him. If anything, he became more frenzied, licking his own blood from his lips as he continued his assault. With a desperate surge of strength, I twisted my trapped arm. My fingers closed around the grip of my service weapon. Jack sensed the movement and clamped his teeth down on my hand. I screamed as his teeth punctured skin, but maintained my grip on the weapon. I pressed the barrel against his chest and pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening inside the vehicle. Jack's body jerked with the impact. His eyes widened in surprise, but he continued struggling. I fired again. This time, Jack slumped against me. Blood poured from the 2 holes in his chest, soaking his uniform and mine. His breathing became labored, wet sounds gurgling with each exhale. "Too late for you," he whispered against my ear. "We're just the beginning." His body went limp. The car fell silent except for my ragged breathing and the soft tick of cooling engine parts. I shoved Jack's body off me. He slumped into the passenger seat, head lolling to the side. Those black eyes still open but vacant in death. Blood pooled on the seat beneath him and dripped onto the floor mats. My hands shook as I holstered my weapon. My right hand throbbed where Jack's teeth had broken the skin. Fresh blood mixed with the partially healed wounds from the Connolly attack 2 weeks earlier. The reality of my situation crashed down upon me. The hunger at the apartment complex, the heightened senses I'd been experiencing since waking in the hospital, the strange dreams of flesh and blood. I wasn't recovering from the attack. I was transforming. A sharp pain shot through my gums. I ran my tongue over my teeth and felt the distinct sensation of something pushing through the tissue. Something sharp. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of my eyes. The pupils had begun to dilate, black spreading outward to consume the iris. Jack was right. It was too late. I sat in the blood-splattered car, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The lake stretched before me, dark water glimmering with reflected light. No witnesses around, no houses within sight. Just the overlook, the lake, and the encroaching night. I needed to dispose of Jack's body. I needed to figure out what was happening to me. I needed to protect others from whatever I was becoming. The lake provided the first solution. I exited the vehicle and circled to the passenger side. Jack's lifeless form was heavy as I dragged him from the seat. Blood smeared across the gravel as I pulled him toward the water's edge. I searched his pockets, finding keys, wallet, phone, and a small object wrapped in cloth. Unwrapping it, I discovered a glass vial filled with dark, viscous liquid. More of the Amazon special. I pocketed it, then continued my grim task. Rocks from the shore provided weight. I filled Jack's pockets, tied more stones to his belt, with his own shoelaces. The work was mechanical, detached. I felt nothing as I prepared my partner's body for disposal. When I finished, I rolled Jack into the water. The splash seemed impossibly loud in the stillness of evening. His body sank quickly, vanishing beneath the dark surface. Ripples expanded outward, then gradually disappeared, leaving the lake as placid as before. I waded back to shore, my uniform soaked and stained. The setting sun cast long shadows across the overlook. I returned to the car and sat behind the wheel, staring at nothing. The hunger was growing. I could feel it building inside me. A gnawing emptiness that ordinary food would never satisfy. My new teeth continued pushing through, sharper with each passing minute. The wounds on my hand and arm burned as if the infection was spreading visibly through my veins. I knew what I had to do. I would drive deep into the mountains, far from town, far from people. I had my service weapon. One bullet would ensure I never became what the Connollys had been, what Jack had become. I started the engine. The dashboard clock read 7:42 p.m., plenty of time to reach the remote fire roads before full darkness fell. I put the car in reverse, then froze. Movement caught my eye. A group of hikers emerged from a trailhead at the edge of the parking area. 5 of them, 3 men and 2 women, laughing and chatting as they approached their vehicles. Their faces were flushed from exertion. Shirts were damp with sweat. The scent hit me like a physical force. Salt, warmth, life. My enhanced senses detected each individual heartbeat and the unique smell of each person. Saliva flooded my mouth. My new teeth ached with anticipation. No, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. I needed to leave now, before the hunger overwhelmed me, but my body moved of its own accord. I stepped out of the car, blood-stained uniform partially concealed by the gathering dusk. "Evening?" I called, my voice surprisingly steady. "Everything okay here?" The hikers turned toward me, relief visible on their faces at the sight of a police officer. "We're fine," one of the women said. "Just finished the Sunset Trail." I moved toward them, fighting the urge that grew with each step. I could smell the blood pulsing beneath their skin. Could almost taste it. "That trail can be tricky after dark," I said, closing the distance. "Would you like me to check your equipment before you head out?" 5 pairs of eyes watched me approach, trusting, unaware. 5 hearts pumped blood through 5 bodies. The hunger roared through me, drowning out my conscience and my humanity. I smiled, feeling my new teeth press against my lips.